Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. The Emerging Threats Subcommittee meets this afternoon to receive testimony from the leaders of the U.S. Special Operations Command service components. We look forward to hearing how you are shaping our Special Operations Forces in line with the priorities laid out by the National Defense Strategy and what we can do to ensure the readiness of your forces for the range of missions they may be asked to conduct in coming years. First, I'd like to welcome our witnesses today, Lieutenant General Slife, Commander of U.S. Air Force Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Braga, Commander of U.S. Army Special Operations Command, Rear Admiral Howard, Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, and Major General Glynn, Commander of U.S. Marine Forces Special Operations Command. I also hope you will pass along our sincere appreciation for the service and sacrifice of the approximately 74,000 men and women of SOCOM and their families. The Special Operations community has achieved so much for the nation in the last 20 years, but it has also borne a significant burden in doing so. As our strategic priorities evolve, we must never forget the people that make our special operations capabilities so effective. As SOCOM Commander General Clark stated during his posture hearing earlier this month, SOF create strategic, asymmetric advantages for the nation across the spectrum of conflict. Their enduring value resides in the ability to adapt and to combat asymmetric threats, including in the gray zone, employ precision and surprise to achieve strategic effects in conflict or crisis, build access, placement, and influence through sustained partnership with foreign forces, and support allies and partners, resilience and resistance efforts, all providing discrete options when conventional action is impractical or not desired. General Clark's testimony builds upon the recently released Special Operations Forces vision and strategy that lays out an ambitious 10-year roadmap for realigning special operations capabilities to support the National Defense Strategy. The threat posed by violent extremists remains present, and our SOF will remain at the forefront of keeping pressure on terrorist networks to prevent them from conducting attacks against our homeland and interests overseas. Successive national defense strategies have rightly emphasized a more sustainable approach to counterterrorism, and long-term strategic competition has become the primary strategic focus. Our Special Operations Forces have a central role to play across the spectrum of competition, crisis, and, if necessary, conflict with our strategic adversaries, even when U.S. forces are not directly involved in hostilities. As has been widely reported, the persistent engagement of U.S. Special Operations Forces with their Ukrainian counterparts over a period of years has undoubtedly contributed to their success in degrading the larger and more heavily armed Russian invasion forces. Without going into details of our current support to the Ukrainian forces, I hope our witnesses today will discuss the lessons learned from our engagement with Ukraine and how they can be applied to shaping our Special Operations Forces for the future. As agile as our SOF community is, adjusting to the demands of long-term strategic competition will not be easy after more than 20 years of sustained counterterrorism and stability operations. Our SOF will require not only new skills and capabilities, but also new operating concepts to make best use of their limited capacity and ensure their activities are fully integrated with conventional and interagency partners, a concept described by the new National Defense Strategy as integrated deterrence. During today's testimony, I hope you will address how your commands are preparing our Special Operations Forces to support the requirements of the geographic combatant commands while balancing the high demand for special operations capabilities around the world. I hope you will also address our efforts to ensure that our Special Operations Forces remain a respected and trusted force by reinforcing a culture of accountability. Last, but most certainly not least, I hope you will update us on efforts to support Special Operations families as they manage the stress resulting from the frequent and demanding deployment of their loved ones. I'll now turn to our ranking member, Senator Ernst, for any opening comments that she may have.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I apologize for my tardiness. A number of us will have other committees will pop in and out as we can, but again, I appreciate you appearing in front of our subcommittee. And also, thank you for your continued service, not just to you, but to your command teams as well. We want to recognize those NCOs and leaders that participate in your roles as well. So, of course, the testimony that you provide today will play an important role in this committee's work on the National Defense Authorization Act. And the men and women of Special Operations Command have been at the forefront of our national security over the last 2 decades and have undertaken some of the nation's most challenging missions. They've inflicted serious damage to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, and other terrorist groups that want to harm us. And while the counterterrorism mission will remain an enduring requirement for our special operators, the force must transform itself to deal with the growing threat posed by China, by Russia, and other state actors. This will require modernizing the force, updating training and tactics, and employing innovative operational concepts. That is why I included in last year's NDAA a provision requiring a special operations joint operating concept for competition and conflict. I look forward to that being developed and delivered to this committee this year. In order to support efforts to modernize the force, we need to provide them with the resources they need to fight and win in a future fight. President Biden's budget request is woefully inadequate in this regard. The fiscal year 23 top-line request for SOCOM is the same as it was last year, despite a significant increase in threats. As we all know, a flat budget equals a budget cut. This reality is only exacerbated by the rising inflation. SOCOM estimates that its fiscal year 23 budget request is actually $1.3 billion, or 9% less than its fiscal year 20 budget using constant dollars. This represents a significant decrease in SOCOM's buying power and hampers its efforts to modernize the force. That's why this committee needs to look at SOCOM's unfunded requirements list and do what it can to help address these shortfalls. I hope our witnesses will tell us where they are facing the most pressing shortfalls and describe the impact on their ability to accomplish the mission. Lastly, and most importantly, I want to talk about the greatest capability in SOF, our special operations men and women. As the first SOF truth says, humans are more important than hardware. That's why I've been so supportive of the Preservation of the Force and Families Initiative. Created after Admiral Olson's testimony in 2011 that the force is, quote, beginning to show some fraying around the edges, end quote, POTF has been instrumental in taking care of the physical, mental, and spiritual needs of our operators and their families. POTF truly is a readiness builder for the force. I look to our witnesses to describe how they are using POTF and other programs to ensure our troops and their families get the support they need. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. We'll now begin with witness statements. We'll start with Lieutenant General Slife, Commander of U.S. Air Force Special Operations Command. General Slife.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Ernst, distinguished members of the committee. I'm honored to appear before you today as the Commander of your Air Force Special Operations Command, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak about the employment of our nation's Special Operations Forces in the future operating environment. On behalf of myself and our Command Chief, Chief Master Sergeant Corey Olson, and the 21,500 airmen we serve together, thank you for the support and resources provided by this committee since our last testimony last year. The National Defense Strategy describes a strategic environment substantially different from the one in which we've operated for the last 2 decades. AFSOC, like the other soft components, finds itself at a strategic discontinuity, a moment in which the future should not be considered a linear extension of the past, but rather as something different altogether. Such inflection points require transformation. My goal today is to describe in greater detail some of the changes we are implementing to ensure our airmen, the disciplined professionals who represent our competitive advantage, remain relevant in the emerging operating environment. As the Department embraces integrated deterrence as the framework concept of our defense strategy, the AFSOC of the future will have to balance among 5 focus areas to compete with our pacing adversaries. First, AFSOC will generate advantage by campaigning in the gray zone, operating across the spectrum of visibility and attribution. We'll use our force to create dilemmas and uncertainty and present cost-imposing problems for our adversaries. For instance, the development of an amphibious capability for our MC-130 transport aircraft will enable runway-independent operations, extend the global reach and survivability of the aircraft, and provide access to the enormous portions of the Earth's surface covered by water that doesn't currently exist. Secondly, we'll engage as part of the broader joint force, employing our unique and sensitive capabilities to create windows of advantage and sap adversary strength. In order to do this effectively, we're transforming our training and force presentation models. Our force generation process is made up of 4 phases, each 5 months in length. The phases include a reset phase, individual unit training, as well as joint and collective training prior to commitment as part of the joint force. We're pathfinding a new capability that we refer to as mission sustainment teams. These 58-person teams are comprised of 22 different specialties and allow our airmen to operate out of austere regions with the agility the future operating environment requires. Our airmen will spend the 15 months of the force generation cycle training in skills above and beyond what their normal tasks might entail. The end result is a team of multifunctional airmen integrated into our tactical formations that can provide limited force protection, air transportation services, bed down, subsistence, and operational contracting support, and aircraft and personnel safety to include explosive ordnance disposal. By building these small, agile teams capable of operating in disaggregated fashion in austere sites, we'll create dilemmas and uncertainty for our adversaries. Third, AFSOC will remain poised to respond to global crises and contingencies, wherever and whenever required, in increasingly contested environments. We're employing our force generation model to produce mission command echelons at a higher state of readiness than previously has been possible. Our force generation model will prepare, train, certify, verify, and validate our airmen and their command teams are ready for alert and deployment taskings. These airmen will be trained to respond to short-notice taskings while employing and maneuvering in militarily and politically contested environments. This will reduce the current risk to mission and risk to force by providing continuity of leadership. Fourth, AFSOC will more efficiently disrupt violent extremist organizations to ensure they're unable to mount external attacks on the U.S. homeland and do so in a cost-effective manner. Our armed overwatch programs, light footprint, rapid deployability, multi-mission utility, and much lower operating costs per flight hour will enable AFSOC to do more missions with fewer aircraft than had previously been possible. Finally, AFSOC will remain focused on the specific tasks and missions assigned to SOCOM under the Unified Command Plan and the Joint Strategic Campaign Plan. Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Ernst, distinguished members of the committee, the nation, the Air Force, and U.S. Special Operations Command appreciate your time today and giving me the opportunity to talk to you just a little bit about the AFSOC of the future.
Thank you, General. Lieutenant General Braga, Commander of U.S. Army Special Operations Command. Go ahead, General.
Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Ernst, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to represent the 36,000 exceptional men and women of the United States Army Special Operations Command, 2,800 of which are deployed right now across 77 countries. I'm proud to accompany my teammates seated left and right of me that I've had the honor and privilege to serve in combat. Senator Blackburn, for her behalf, on behalf of the entire command, I'd like to thank her and express our gratitude for her support in upgrading Jeremiah Johnson's Silver Star for his valorous actions in Tongo Tongo, Niger. Thank you. Joining me today is Command Sergeant Major Michael Weimer, USASOC Senior Enlisted Advisor. Mike really represents our people. Mike has served the nation for 29 years, deployed to combat 19 times since September 11, 2001. He's carried with him a New York City Fire Department patch as a reminder of our solemn responsibility to protect the nation. On the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we were fortunate to stand with hundreds of our Army Special Operations teammates while Mike returned that same patch that he carried on multiple objectives around the world to the men and women of FDNY on the crowded and emotional streets of Manhattan as a symbol of our solidarity. It's an honor for both of us to serve with the brave men and women of the Army Special Operations community who were the first in and the last out of Afghanistan. As we approach Memorial Day, we are reminded of the selfless sacrifices made by our soldiers and their families over the last 20 years, especially the more than 1,700 Gold Star family members. This year, we will inscribe Staff Sergeant Ryan Knaus, one of our psychological operations warriors, as the 378th name on our wall, and we will never forget. Every component of the Army Special Operations Command contributed in Afghanistan. From our Special Operations aviators infilling Rangers in the dark of night, to our civil affairs teams operating in austere conditions, to Green Berets riding on horseback through the mountains. Your Army Special Operations had an impact and protected the homeland without fail. I assure you we remain vigilant in protecting the homeland as we weight our efforts to the priorities outlined in the National Defense Strategy. USASOC supports the Joint Force through irregular warfare campaigning for integrated deterrence, while simultaneously preparing for high-end conflict. It is vital that we address these challenges with strong interagency, international, and joint relationships to preserve our advantages over our nation's adversaries. Russia's invasion of Ukraine demonstrated President Putin's determination to impose his will in blatant disregard of international norms, rules, and behaviors. Our existing partnerships and forward presence in the region demonstrated strategic value when options were needed. Following the invasion of Crimea over the last 7.5 years, Army Special Operations deployed to assist our fearless Ukrainian partners in support of building their resistance capability and resiliency. As we apply lessons from this crisis to train, organize, equip, deploy, and campaign, we remain resolute in our resolve to address our nation's most consequential strategic pacing challenge, the People's Republic of China. There is no sanctuary from the scope and scale of the threat. We remain steadfast in our confidence that this generation of Army Special Operations soldiers will build upon the legacy of those who preceded them and uphold our promise to protect the nation without equal. We are committed to maintaining your trust and continuing our complete transparency with Congress and the American people. I thank you for this opportunity and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General. Rear Admiral Howard, Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. Go ahead, Admiral.
Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Ernst, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to report on the mission readiness of Naval Special Warfare. I'm honored to update you and the American people, and humbled to do so alongside Force Master Chief Bill King, who I've served with for 31 years. My report to the American people is shared with humility, a humility sharpened through the complexity and risk of our mission. The threats that face our nation give us urgency to accelerate distinctive and irregular capabilities from the maritime flanks of our adversaries for integrated deterrence in our nation's defense. I am confident that we are delivering the disruptive and necessary change to be ready for what the nation will ask of our force. Our comparative advantage is our people, this nation's greatest treasure. Our SEAL operators, combatant craft crewmen, warfighting support teammates, and families, who, alongside our Gold Star families, form a highly reliable team. A team fused together and enrolled with a common purpose, trust and candor, creativity and resilience. We've fortified a culture of continuous assessment and development and designed new character, cognitive, and leadership attribute assessments across the career continuum. We've implemented and improved a more rigorous selection for all leaders, officers and senior enlisted, a process that includes psychometric testing, peer and subordinate assessments, and a double-blind selection panel leveraging data science and counter-bias approaches to increase precision and objectivity of leader selection and assignment decisions. We recognize diversity as one of our greatest sources of strength to solve the hardest problems, and we are making significant investments with the Navy to directly engage communities that are underrepresented in our formation. We built the sustainable architecture to proactively seek out candidates that may not have historically thought of joining our ranks. Since my last report, we graduated our first female combatant craft crewman and tripled female cadre across all phases of the assessment selection pathway to bolster development of women in naval special warfare. Delivering a more lethal and survivable force requires that we evolve and adapt faster than our adversaries. Over the past year, we developed a plan to substantively increase investment in the modernization of exquisite cross-domain capabilities that provide the access and effects we must have as a nation to persistently hold peer adversaries' critical targets at risk. We are now holding approximately a third of our force in reserve to more agilely respond to emerging global missions, and critically, to conduct the urgent experimentation with innovative mission concepts for step changes in tactics and advanced technologies. Technologies that include artificial intelligence, autonomous multi-domain unmanned systems, and cyber, electronic warfare, and kinetic effects. As the Navy's commandos, we are tightly linked with fleet commanders, allies, partners, and U.S. government agencies to create a regular warfighting advantage for the joint force and generate uncertainty in adversary confidence, escalation off-ramps, and greater leverage for our civilian leadership in crisis. Master Chief King and I are proud of our force and their service to protect and defend our great nation. We will continue to be humble stewards of the incredible trust that you and the American people place in us, and we thank you for your continued support of our team and Naval Special Warfare's families. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. Major General Glynn, Commander of U.S. Marine Forces Special Operations Command. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly, and Ranking Member Ernst, and other distinguished members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to update you on the status and posture of Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command. And it's an honor for Sergeant Major Loftus and I to join you again this year alongside my fellow SOF component commanders and their senior enlisted leaders. Since we met last year, MARSOC maintained a persistent forward-deployed presence in support of 6 named operations across the globe, and Marine Raiders conducted operations in Indo-Pacific Command, Central Command, and Africa Command, while episodic deployments in support of European and Southern Commands. Our mission-tailored forces continue to maximize efficiency while remaining faithful stewards of resources and continue to account for significantly more of the missions performed than the size of the force, 3,500, and slice of the budget would predict. As you've heard from the geographic combatant commanders, they're increasingly challenged in the uncertainty of semi-permissive environments as our adversaries seek to gain and maintain influence in the gray zone. MARSOC is leveraging our organizational agility, predominantly our size, to maximize the effectiveness of the force and provide immense benefit to the SOF enterprise and our parent service. Competition requires special operations forces that can be active in the gray zone and win in conflict, for which your Marine Raiders are postured and focused. In fact, it's our quest to bring transparency to the gray and gray zone. Over the past year, we've further developed our innovative operating concept that provides the nation with a unique capability. Strategic shaping and reconnaissance encompasses a wide range of capabilities, from cooperation with partners and allies to increasing costs to adversaries to deter, disrupt, and deny their objectives. The operational art of SSR, strategic shaping and reconnaissance, seeks to connect the joint interagency, intergovernmental, and multinational communities as they develop persistent networks that can enhance strategic intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. The concept supports multi-domain campaigning for long-term shaping and influence in support of SOCOM, the Joint Force, and the nation in strategically critical locations. As one example, over the course of the last year, MARSOC provided soft peculiar capabilities to the Theater Special Operations Command for AFRICOM, while connecting the combat power of the Marine Corps' 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit to provide capability and capacity in support of current operations off the coast of Africa. This demonstrated the possibilities in a domain approach that includes forward-based SOF operating in the littorals that can connect air, maritime, and cyber elements, in this case of a Marine Expeditionary Unit, off the coast of Somalia to maintain pressure on violent extremists while supporting our regional partners. As we experiment with emerging and next-generation capabilities, operations against violent extremist organization networks continue and provide our forces the placement and access with partners and allies against priority threats. We pursue missions in littoral regions that facilitate close ties to the naval force that include fleet marine forces. Our ability to leverage these characteristics is integral to our expanding impact as part of what our Commandant calls the stand-in force, necessary at the persistent forward edge of deterrence. We recognize that the current and future operational capabilities rest upon a foundation that we all have in common: outstanding Marine Raiders and their families. To maximize continued excellence and enable new operational concepts, we must continue to safeguard and sustain our most valuable resource through programs we discussed in some detail last year, specifically preservation of the force and family, sexual assault and prevention, and diversity and inclusion initiatives. Each are in a different point of maturity, yet they contribute to a collective organizational culture of physical, mental, spiritual, and family excellence to enhance mission success and strengthen family resilience. In closing, we remain committed to providing the Joint Force with Marine Raiders that possess unique special operations capabilities, who are threat-focused, devoted to force modernization, and whose actions continually demonstrate our motto, Spiritus Invictus, or unconquerable spirit. On behalf of the men and women of MARSOC, I thank the committee for your continued support to those in uniform and their families, and for your commitment to our national security. Thank you.
Thank you, General, and thank you to all of you for your statements. I'll begin our first round of questions for 5 minutes here. And this first question is for all four of you. And since we only have 5 minutes, we'll have to keep it brief. For much of the last 2 years, the Department has been refining a joint warfighting concept that finds a credible theory of victory should deterrence fail with a near-peer adversary. However, our long-term strategic competitors continue to make gains through hybrid warfare and coercion below the threshold of traditional armed conflict. As you all have pointed out in your statements, our SOF have a key role to play in this type of warfare. So as you look at what will be asked of our Special Operations Forces for the next, say, 10 to 15 years, what do you believe will be the most important skill sets and capabilities, and which of these will be the most difficult to develop? And we'll start with General Slythe.
Thank you, Senator. As integrated deterrence is the framework concept, one of the things that we talk about in AFSOC is that deterrence is the noun and integrated is the adjective. Deterrence is the thing we're trying to do, but integrated is how we're going to do it. And I think when you think about what integration means, there is no force in the DoD that is more integrated than SOF. We're jointly interoperable at much lower levels. All four of us have operated with one another in combat since we were much more junior in our careers. And so SOF is integrated internally. Furthermore, SOF has a set of relationships around the globe, both with partner militaries and also with embassy teams that is unrivaled. AFSOC was present in 74 countries since the last time we had the opportunity to speak to this committee. And finally, across the U.S. government, no part of the DoD force is more connected to the interagency and the intelligence community than our special operations forces. So I think that is going to be where our competitive advantage lies, is our ability to integrate internally across the U.S. government and also with our partners.
Thank you. General Braga.
Senator, I'd echo the critical importance of making sure we work with our international partners and intel community interagency. It's even more important as we face strategic challenges of China and Russia. We have to rethink everything we do, how we live in the contact layer, and seek to provide options, both during competition and should it transition to high-end conflict. How do you survive? How do you shoot, move, and communicate? How do you live in a different electromagnetic spectrum that our adversaries invested very heavily in? So we are relooking everything from our capabilities to how we train people to ensure their survivability, still maintain a focus on smaller units of action having an outsized effect, be able to operate, though, in austere locations with those partners in the contact layer.
Admiral.
Our contribution to integrated deterrence is principally the irregular ways and means that we deter our peer adversaries. We are prioritizing irregular partners, irregular global partners, irregular denied access capabilities for hard targets, irregular and scalable effects. In terms of capabilities that support this effort, lethal and survivable access platforms, both on the surface and the subsurface domains, unmanned systems that are increasingly autonomous and interoperable, and then cyber and electronic warfare.
Thank you. General?
Senator, as you're aware, deterrence and deterrence theory can get pretty complicated, but the biggest thing is the most significant thing in deterrence that we find, as has been alluded to, comes from our allies and partners and their perspective of risk. And what is most risky to our adversaries, be they China or Russia. And so the most important part of deterrence is going to remain the relationships and the allies and partnerships that we specifically invest in the special operations community. To the other half of your question, the hardest part, I believe, is going to be the technical aspects of. We've all already alluded to information operations and cyber capabilities, and there's been one allusion to space thus far. That's going to take education and training over time. That's a substantial investment on all of our parts.
Well, thank you. When General Slife mentioned the MC-130 amphibious operations, I thought that might be on the list. An Air Force guy potentially landing on an aircraft carrier might be a skill set that would be hard to develop. And I'm very. It's easy. All right. Well, thank you for that. And I'll now recognize Senator Ernst for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And of course, as we all sat down and visited during your office calls, we talked extensively about POTF. And so maybe in my second round of questions, I can ask each of you a little bit more about POTF and your specific programs. But General Slife, there was something that you brought up in your office call that I would love to hear a little bit more about. Your efforts within POTF to address the moral hazard. And it's something that I hadn't put a lot of thought into, but if you could explain to the members of our subcommittee what your intent would be as you continue to delve into this area.
Well, thank you, Senator. I'm happy to do it. The conversation that Senator Ernst and I had yesterday, we talked about the 3 types of invisible wounds that many of our service members suffer from because of their experiences over the last 20 years. The first one is neurocognitive injury, and so this is really TBI, concussive effects, those type. It's a physical damage to the brain, and so we understand that. We are focused on that. SOCOM has a DoD leading program around neurocognitive health. The second invisible injury is psychological injury, and this manifests as post-traumatic stress. It is the manifestation of witnessing or being part of a significantly traumatic event and the long-term effects that has on you. But I think there's a third type of invisible injury, and it's moral injury. And these are the injuries that are incurred when we act in a way that is contrary to our moral system, and we do damage to damage to ourselves as we reflect back on the things that we have done over the last 20 years. And so I've experienced some of this myself, having made decisions in the moment to take people's lives that I then, afterwards wonder, was that the right decision? It seemed like the right decision at the time, but what does that mean to me now? And so as we've looked at moral injury as a third type of this invisible wounds kind of triad, we have been engaged directly with the Air Force to invest in that leg of our POTIF program that would attend to these moral injuries. And we have gotten commitment from the Air Force to embed a religious support team, a chaplain and a chaplain assistant, NCO, into every squadron level formation in Air Force Special Operations Command. This doesn't exist anywhere in the Air Force. I had to work hard with the Air Force to get there, but we do have that program coming down the pike, and so that's a big win for us in the POTIF front, and coupled with some of the other things that we may talk about, Senator. That's really the answer to your question.
Yeah, no, thank you, General Slife, and I'm anxious to hear more about that as you continue to develop that. And General Braga, thank you so much. Again, during the office call, you had the opportunity to visit with me and my team about the Ukrainian forces that you have been able to train and work with over 7 years or so. It was an investment that now we see as paying large dividends. And what are the follow-on risks from the invasion, in particular when we look at Moldova and Kosovo? And just in your judgment, where do we need to expand our footprint and presence in EUCOM?
Well, ma'am, certainly I don't want to speak for EUCOM and their current prioritization, but I would say we have had long-standing generational relationships in some places across Eastern Europe, both NATO and non-NATO countries, that I think pay huge dividends in return on investment for, honestly, small amounts of physical footprint on the ground as we expand their capabilities. We mentioned resistance and resiliency, but it's also interoperability. It's that, and I believe Senator Kelly mentioned that, expanding the axis, presence, and influence. And when I mentioned the scale and scope of the threat of Russia and China, we won't be able to do this alone. That's why I talk about the international partners and increasing their capacities and their capabilities so critical. And that's from information operations, that's unconventional warfare, that's asymmetric tactics, techniques, and procedures that you're seeing unfold right now in the Ukraine. I won't go into in this forum, but would be absolutely willing to go into perhaps a closed-door session of other partnerships we are expanding right now. And certainly the world is paying attention to what's unfolding in Ukraine that is adding emphasis to that.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kane.
Thank you to all of you. Your testimonies, a couple of points that I find interesting and just kind of underline. General Glenn, you talked about, when you were asked about deterrence, you said, the lead deterrence we have is our network of alliances and partners, and it truly is an edge where Russia and China, they're just not really in the same ballpark with us on that. They do not have that network, and now they're seeing how powerful a network of alliances can be. So that's a takeaway. And then, General Braga, I like the fact that you started with talking about your enlisted leader colleague carrying the FDNY patch for 20 years, because it has been 20 years where I think we have leaned really heavily on special forces, sort of disproportionate to your slice of the budget or the size of the manpower component. We lean very heavily on you. So I have really one question that would take much longer than 5 minutes to answer, and maybe I'll start, General Glenn, and go right to left around the table from my side. During this 20 years, we leaned very heavily on you, largely in missions against non-state terrorist organizations. They've had a lot of lethal capacity, but they haven't had the ability to challenge us in the air, challenge our communications dominance, challenge some other just strong areas of expertise we have, as we're now looking at a national defense strategy that focuses on peers that do have the ability to, not have a permissive air environment or challenges on the communication side. I suppose as special operations leaders, you have to think about new strategies and make new investment decisions too, to recognize the reality of that kind of a challenge. Talk a little bit about how within your commands you're sort of looking at battle against great state competition and how that affects the planning and investment decisions you make.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And I think I'll tee it up, and then as we go around the horn, we can probably expand on it. The notion of the gray zone is, I guess, where I'll start. And it's defined as gray for a reason, because it's where if we looked at ourselves for 20 years and decided how we would want to combat the strengths that the United States brings in the manner in which we have for the last 20 years, we would probably come to many of the conclusions that our strategic adversaries have as well. And so, to your question, the choices that we're having to determine right now is what of the counterterrorism skill sets, the stuff that we've invested and developed very well over the last 20 years, how much of it translates, how well does it translate, and what else do we need to be able to do? And having stood alongside these gentlemen in the past, I think I'll conclude for the moment with our examination of cyber capabilities, our examination of space capabilities, and the integration with special operations going forward to narrow that gray zone. If you'll allow me to stop there, I know.
Admiral Howard, you and I have talked about the cyber dimension of this before, but I'd love to hear your answer on this as well.
We have, and with cyber and electronic warfare, with our proximity access to hard targets, we see ourselves as part of that kill chain in extending the reach of the cyber and electronic warfare enterprises. But we're clearly at an inflection point. Nationally, I think within special operations, we're entering, I call it the fifth modern era of special operations. For Naval Special Warfare, we over-rotated on counterterrorism, clearly. And we lost some ground in the distinctive things that only we can do. And we are moving with urgency to make the main thing, the things that only we can do in the maritime domain. I'd also say that we are investing in time and space to conduct experimentation and concept development with combat-validated forces. And that's important to embrace what's in front of us, put pressure on ourselves, and deliver step changes. Move faster, learn faster. We can do that at lower training risk with combat-ready forces. And then finally, the fleet integration and using the fleet and the joint force to red team ourselves in terms of survivability and lethality.
Please, General Breyer.
Senator, I'll just mention two to add on there. First, information advantage, information operations. I think we're watching it daily, the strategic impact that it has. I cannot envision a future where that does not increase in importance, affecting target audiences, general populations, governments, armies, morale, and eroding their overall effectiveness. Secondly, we've started a campaign of learning. The other component commanders mentioned it, but I really look at soft, space, and cyber as the modern-day triad. I think we owe you best military advice and options in the National Command Authority for flexible deterrent, flexible response options that involve and optimize those three legs of the triad for options, both in deterrence, but also maintaining dominance in the domains for high-end conflict and supporting the joint force.
I'm out of time, but could I let General Slife answer? Are you okay, Coach? Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. I'll just briefly highlight one other thing. I believe that the service components of SOF are most effective when we are closest to our parent services. And I think you've heard some of that from Admiral Howard talking about his relationship with the fleet. It's no different for us. And so I think one of the places where we see a value proposition for SOF is enabling our, particularly in conflict-type scenarios, enabling our broader service, parents to be effective. And so I think, for AFSOC, there's a lot of work to be done in the integrated air defense area as well as the counter space mission area. There are a lot of very critical capabilities our adversaries rely on in those areas that I think SOF brings unique capability to effect.
Great.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today. Thank you for your service and such tough times for the world that we live in. This is for all of you. What resources, if any, have you asked for but not have been provided? And I'm asking it for this reason. In November 2020, Acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller enacted the FY 2017 NDA requirement to elevate the SOLIC position to be on par with other service secretaries. But last May, Secretary Austin reversed this decision, burying SOLIC back under the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. SOLIC is still understaffed and isn't getting the routine direct access to the Secretary and Deputy Secretary it should, as directed by the NDAA. So just any comments any one of you have on that? General, I'll start with you.
Senator, thank you. Each year I think we find ourselves trying to balance our budgeting recommendations among modernization, readiness, personnel programs, these types of things. And every year we come up, short. I think we could all find additional areas where we would like to invest in order to reduce risk. The budget that was submitted, I think Senator Ernst described some of the fiscal realities of it, but it represents a balance of risk among those areas. And to directly answer your question, I think each of us have contributed to the SOCOM Commander's unfunded priority list, which reflect those areas where if additional resources were available, those would be the things we would recommend that Congress might consider investing in.
Thank you. General?
Senator, I'd echo, we've submitted that in the Congressional Unfunded Priority List, and it touches upon a lot of some of the capabilities we were talking about previously. But there is absolutely an impact if you just take inflation alone. Inflation alone has certainly affected our supply chain, no different than any other facet of society right now. I mean, the average increase in parts, when you're talking for our helicopter fleet, has gone up 31 to 35%. And that comes at a trade-off. So there's always trade-offs and prioritization decisions to be made where you balance risk to force, risk to mission, training readiness, or deploying, through operations, activities, and investments. So that's continual. But just like the rest of the world, we're dealing with that impact of inflation right now with, as Senator Ernst said, the flat budget.
Thank you. Adam?
What's before the Congress now is an opportunity within Naval Special Warfare to make some additional investments in denied area access across the maritime flank, where we maintain comparative advantage with peer adversaries, irregular and scalable kinetic and non-kinetic effects, so a suite of effects across a range of attribution options there, and the survivability and lethality of our subsea and surface platforms. So we're given the opportunity to make some growth in our community, pending the congressional judgments there. We're on the right trajectory for what I outlined before in terms of what we're aiming for a regular deterrence.
Senator, thanks for the opportunity to comment on it. I would say that the most acute area, the place where we face the hardest choices, and they're well known at ASD SOLIC and at the SOCOM level, that's a good team. It's a good relationship that supports all of us, I believe. But where it really comes down to hard choices, and when we have to make choices between equipment and people. And I think you heard that in our opening statements. And what do I mean by that? Modernization, the investment in the technology that's required to compete with the likes of Russia and China, while taking care of current operations and supporting the force and the family. And I think that's somewhat where we're at now in terms of how will we pay for modernization going forward.
Thank you. Just one more quick question here. A recurring theme here in the Senate is that our commanders in the field don't have enough ISR. Just your quick thoughts, commercially, the available options such as MAXAR. What capabilities do they bring? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Senator, I would offer to you that commercial capabilities are growing at a rate that rivals organic military capabilities, and I think a key part of our ISR enterprise going forward is going to be leveraging the various modalities of intelligence collection available from orbit. So I'm interested in pursuing every one of those as part of a holistic air and space-based ISR architecture.
Anybody else got a thought on MAXAR or any other capabilities?
Sir, Senator, as the world becomes more connected, we need to rethink modern-day ISR. So it's not just from things in orbit, obviously LEO, NEO in space, but also just how the world becomes more connected and rethink and experiment with ways to have better situational understanding out there. Again, I think SOF can be part of that solution with our innovative type mindset of employing commercial capability as well as government procured capability.
Admiral Howard, have you heard of Cell Drone?
Yes, I have.
What do you think about it?
The unmanned capabilities are absolutely critical for for autonomous systems that give us situational awareness, decision dominance, and in the case of that platform specifically, maritime domain awareness.
General Glenn, you got anything to say about it?
I would offer, Senator, that I think when we think ISR, we typically think of that vehicle. And really, General Slife is the one who's educated me over the course of the last year that really the way forward, we need to think about the manner in which those vehicles are controlled, rather than a single operator with a single control system on a single platform, often referred to as swarming. But how will a single operator through a control system have access to any number of platforms that can do what's needed when it's needed?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go through our next round, 5-minute questions. I want to start with Admiral Howard. Talk a little bit about undersea capabilities here. It's pretty much understood that our undersea capability is we've got a comparative advantage to Russia and China in the ability to operate under the ocean. And I understand this is one of SOCOM's priority investment areas for fiscal year 23 is the development of a new undersea insertion and exfiltration capability. So, Admiral, can you just kind of step through us here how the development process is going, how you're working with SOCOM to extend the undersea reach of naval special operators, and also a little bit about integration with the regular Navy. Often as you're developing a system and you're trying to, get it to work with, something you might not, it's not part of the development program, but it needs to work with existing hardware. That can be a challenge. So if you can comment on that as well.
Thank you. Our relationship with our submarine force has never been closer. We learned from working with our submarine force, they're an exemplar of a highly reliable organization, which we always strive to be. We also have an advantage as a country in the undersea with our allies and partners. I was recently in Europe with several of our allies where we are collaborating on new capabilities and combined operations. For acquisition and oversight and execution and due diligence of these programs, we're investing with SOCOM and SOCOM's AT&L inside of my own command so that we bolster the workforce around the execution of the program. The integration, that is, we have a dependency with the Navy. There's great alignment with Admiral Gilday's staff in the OPNAV N9 under Admiral Khan, and then, of course, at NAVC. I'm confident that we're on a trajectory to deliver the nation capabilities that are distinctive and access the denied targets in a way that's survivable and persistent.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the requirements that unclassified, what you're looking for in this system, and how the integration with the Navy is going? I know in prior systems we have had difficulty integrating hardware onto submarines, and I want to make sure that that's not something we encounter here with this program.
We're on the right course in that regard with the Navy to expand the kinds of capabilities that we can integrate onto our submarine hosts. With future capabilities, we're looking at extended ranges, the extended increasing payloads, teaming with unmanned systems. I mean, that's generally our strategy. We see the undersea as absolutely critical to deterrence. I think it's a place that we maintain advantage, and it's a place where we must maintain advantage to critically deter our peer adversaries.
All right, thank you. Senator Blackburn?
And thank you all. We appreciate your time so incredibly much. General Braga, thank you for your time yesterday. We appreciate that. And we talked a lot about China and the Chinese Communist Party. And I want to talk a bit more about that because, as you know, when we look at what is happening with this new axis of evil, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and look at the way that Russia and China and North Korea also with hypersonics, the way they're looking at space and nuclear and cyber and hypersonics, autonomy, there are concerns that have arisen. So talk to me a little bit about how you're leveraging early research in emerging technologies to prevent some of the technological surprises across different warfighting domains. And how are you drilling down on that? Because it's going to require an intentionality that sometimes may not have been required in other disciplines.
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to discuss that. I think one of the transferable lessons learned from the last couple decades is the power of network analysis and network defeat in identifying critical vulnerabilities, whether it's a supply chain or a high-end weapon system, as really the whole joint force is looking at maintain dominance, whether it's JADC2 or the Joint Warfighting Concept. SOF's role in that is I think, clearly to seek out some of those vulnerabilities, work amongst our joint force partners and specifically in support of the geographical combatant commands, but leveraging perhaps the other strengths of, I mentioned earlier about cyber and space for more holistic effect to hold at risk some of their critical vulnerabilities and nodes, be it in C5 ISRT, their mission command platforms, or weapon systems. Would absolutely appreciate the opportunity in a closed-door session to go into more detail at some of the operational aspects that we are looking at, but make no have confidence that we are continually experimenting and looking at and analyzing how to best take advantage of those. Learn more first, and then look how to take advantage of those possible vulnerabilities in support of the joint force.
And I think it would be helpful to hear from each of you. And you can just give this to us in a written response. I think it's probably a bit too much for here, and then we can dig a little deeper on that in a closed session at some point. But hear from each of you where you feel like there are shortfalls in capacity and capabilities, and then how we need to change. As each year we're working on the NDAA, and as we change that focus to look at what we're going to do in the future, how we're going to utilize new capabilities, hypersonics, how we're going to utilize some of the technological innovation that is coming our way. I think it would be helpful to us as we go through to figure out, where you all see, where the difference is in what we perceive and what you're dealing with every day as you are going about your task. So if I could ask you all for a written response. I would appreciate that. I also want to turn a little bit to AI and assisted decision making. We have, I would say probably at this point, because of ISR, we have volumes of data and video feeds that could be used in to establish really kind of a routine and also an abnormal activity line. And I think it is important for us to know how you all are using big data analytics to look at this, and how you are going to expand the utilization of big data in order to accommodate and backfill limited personnel. And knowing what you're going to do with those analytics and how you're going to utilize AI would be helpful to us. And I guess I've got 5 pages of questions here, and I am out of time. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll send it back to you, and we'll have some things for the record. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Ernst.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm going to go right back to POTF. And I think as we have all sat down and visited about the things that are important for our forces, especially in the realm of SOCOM, it does come back to preservation of the force and family. And so I know, General Slife, we had started with you. You talked a little bit about moral injury and what you're doing to combat those effects. And what I would like for each of you to do as well is talk a little bit about POTF. And if you have any special initiatives that you have started, we would love to hear about those, as well as other avenues that you would like to see adopted throughout your forces. General Slife, do you have any additional that you would like to add? And then we'll go to General Braga.
Briefly, Senator, I will tell you that in our, POTF resourcing is appropriately spread a little unevenly across AFSOC, as some of our units have greater demands for one aspect than another. But one thing that we have generally seen is the units with POTF resources embedded at the unit level have lower instances of ill discipline. They have lower instances of sexual assault and sexual harassment. They have lower instances of suicidal ideation or attempted suicides. And so based on some of this, there's certainly a correlation. We're not yet sure about causation. We continue to collect data to be able to draw that. But based on the very positive results we've seen out of our POTF program, there is an increase in AFSOC's POTF investment. We have taken internal offsets in order to increase our POTF resourcing across more of our units inside of AFSOC because of the very positive results we've seen.
That's good. Go where they are. Yeah, thank you. How about USASOC?
Senator, first of all, thank you for your stalwart support of POTF over the years. It's the men and women of USASOC, absolutely thank you. I think it's been easy to sell when you show the physical manifestation of someone who's had a grievous physical wound, and we've had those type of vignettes, but I do think we need a better job on the data collection phase of it. So we are starting different initiatives from our baselining our incoming students. Again, we have about 3,000 at any one time at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, going through our school system and identifying like a digital profile of them to help them be the best possible person they can be across all pillars of POTF. We're investing and trying to be more data-driven, even on spiritual resiliency, and in falling in line with the Army's lead for spiritual assessment tool, which is at least in the academic research proven to increase resiliency and lower rates of depression and suicide and the like. I am a personal huge believer of the behavioral health impact that both our operational psychologists and clinical workers have just made an untold amount of impact. And when we even look at our formation from suicidal ideations and the like, we have a lower rate of usage rate for acute care for those coming into the formation who have been specifically assessed and selected and those who have just been assigned to United States Army Special Operations Command. But we need to do a better job on the data collection, get that to really everyone to tell the story, the good news story of POTFF. So we're making efforts in that to not only with Smarter Base, the SOCOM solution, but also human factors dashboard that we're working on at the USASOC level.
Thank you. Admiral?
No, thank you. One of our data advantage capstone initiatives is around POTFF and seeing the data in a way where we can more accurately articulate measures of effectiveness, understand needs. I would just say tremendous effort on our team to destigmatize mental health issues. The care that we have embedded is transformational from our ops psychologists to our chaplains, and an emphasis on neurocognitive health as well. And then lastly, I'll just say that veteran health and extending, thinking about POTFF into our veteran population. This is where we're partnering with outside of government entities and bringing those best practices to our veteran teammates.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Admiral. General Glenn.
Senator, I'll likewise thank you for your continued support of POTFF. I think I'll take a different tack and just flag an area where I think all of us should pay attention with the shift in the future of what military health care is likely to be. We find ourselves focused on potential gaps between POTFF as we've known it and the areas where it has extended that and our need to walk it back, if you will, to fill in gaps that seem to be created. And I'll give you an example. You've heard several references to mental and behavioral health. That specialty care is an area that we're paying very close attention to going forward. Because you can see that that's going to be a persistent need.
Okay.
And access to that is, I know it's challenging across the enterprise, not just military health care, but that's an example of an area. On the plus side, we talked about this in office call, but for wider awareness, SOCOM's investment in our opportunity to work on the cognitive performance side, our ability to baseline folks who join MARSOC, and now we can watch them over time, is already interesting. I think it's going to become fascinating over the course of 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. So I just returned from visiting our allies and service members, a couple stops in Poland and Germany. It's clear that U.S. Special Operations Forces, can act as a significant force multiplier for our strategic partners, including when facing off some well-armed adversaries. And I think nowhere is this more apparent than in what's going on in Ukraine today. As I mentioned, and I think General Braga mentioned during our opening remarks, reports have indicated that Putin's army here is stalled in Ukraine because of the direct support in training special operations forces of the Ukrainian military since the invasion of Crimea in 2014. So, General Braga, I know that you can't comment, on any specifics in this training, but can you discuss some of the lessons learned from Ukraine regarding the use of Army Special Operations capabilities as the U.S. military continues in this pivot towards great power competition with Russia?
Senator, thank you for the opportunity. I think there's lots of lessons learned that can be applied elsewhere, although other parts of the globe are not certainly the same. From our information ops and psychological operations, civil affairs teams on the ground right now working with the multitude of international non-government organizations supporting the people of Ukraine, and certainly our special forces teams who have been there, again, for multiple years now, helping them. I mean, the credit really goes to the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian military. We just help them a little bit along that journey. But I do think what is an untold story is the international partnership with the special operations forces of multitude of different countries. I won't name the number right now, but they have absolutely banded together in a much outsized impact to support the Ukrainian SOF and the Ukrainian military and their efforts right now that I think is a great news story. And I think that really bore out from the last 20 years of working together, sweating together, bleeding together in different battlefields on different continents. And some of these partners are new. There's been a coalescence and a joining of that unity of effort. It's absolutely inspiring to see. That in itself is, I think you mentioned earlier, is something that our adversaries desire to have, that we have. And that's really a gold standard, those international partnerships that can be part of the solution moving forward. Certainly we're taking tactical lessons learned and immediately trying to apply them to our schoolhouses and our other foreign partners for everyone to learn as this unfortunate conflict continues to unfold.
Yeah, sometimes it's not ideal to share those lessons learned. Do you have any examples that you're comfortable?
Well, it's impressive to see, just open press, you see the impact that manned and unmanned drones and teaming is having. I think that is an absolute critical growth area for the United States Army Special Operations Command. It's one of our modernization priorities, one of our 7 modernization priorities. I cannot envision a future battlefield without ever-increasing manned-unmanned robotics and the application of AI to maximize their effect and impact across all warfighting functions. That's something we're looking at extremely closely and only seeing growth in future prioritization, resources, training, and even possibly we're experimenting of what type of MOSs or branches or specialties are inside the Army Special Operations Command. So it's not just an additional duty, it's an actual specialty.
Can you comment a little bit about how the cultural and language, training that Army Special Operations operators receive, and how that has helped in training our special operations partners in other countries?
Senator, it's imperative that we are both culturally attuned and speak the language. Now, do we speak the language of every country we go to? We can't really match that up, but we try, and we put a lot of effort into it. It's a baseline requirement coming out of the Special Forces pipeline. It's maintained through sustained training, and perhaps most importantly, as we geographically align. I mean, our Special Forces groups and their civil affairs and PSYOPs teams, they stay regionally aligned. We're working in all geographical combatant commanders to this day, and many of them have not taken their eyes off the ball to support the GCC commanders' priorities there, be it SIMC teams, military information support teams, or special forces ODAs, or even aviation detachments, advisory detachments. They're operating around the globe in support of every GCC commander's priorities, but language is absolutely critical to being part of that interoperability. It's not just equipment, and it also shows that you care.
Before I turn it over to Senator Ernst here for the third round of questions. And I know this has been a focus that the Army has had for decades, this language capability. But for General Slife, Admiral Howard, General Glynn, is this something that your special operators are also focused on, or is it a capability you would like to integrate into the force in the future?
Senator, specifically for AFSOC, because most of our operations deals either directly with aviation or with the integration of air and ground capabilities through joint terminal attack control and things of that nature. English is the international language of aviation, as you know, and so what we have found is that our partners generally prefer to do those security force assistance type activities in English because it is what they deal with in the aviation world. So we don't see a demand signal for increased language capability. Although to General Braga's point about cultural training, cultural awareness, and those types of things, that is an area of investment for us as we think about security force assistance.
Thank you, Senator. We have a modest investment. I think it's calibrated the right way, and we also make an effort to increasingly identify candidates that are coming in with natural language capability.
Senator, language and culture have been part of our training pipeline since inception, and so every critical skills operator that is created or has been created over the course of the last 15 years goes through a language unique to the theater in which we intend, they are most likely to deploy. So as you would hope, like we have recently shifted to some of the more significant languages in Indo-PACOM AOR, to including Mandarin Chinese.
Thank you. Senator Ernst?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know our vote has been called, so I'll just be brief, and if you can provide brief answers as well. I did mention a little bit in my opening statement the fact that SOCOM's budget is flat for this year in what the president has submitted. So we know that that's less buying power with the rate of inflation out there. So if you can talk through the impact that will have on your ability to train and resource and mobilize then your forces. I also noted that SOCOM submitted $650 million in unfunded requirements to buy down risk and to accelerate modernization, which really further reinforces the inadequacy of the budget as presented by the president. So if you can, just very briefly, again, General Slife, we'll start with you. If you could talk about the impacts and what that will have on training, modernization, resourcing.
Yes, Senator. Briefly, it delays, any resource shortfalls delays our ability to modernize. It delays our ability to maintain the force at the highest state of readiness. These are all balances. They're part of the risk calculus. And so I think you see, as you characterize it, the SOCOM unfunded priority list are those things that SOCOM believes will buy down that risk to a lower level than where we're carrying it right now.
Great, thank you.
Senator, I echo obviously the unfunded priority list will help buy down that risk by accelerating some of the capabilities we're looking to expand upon that we've been talking about. I mentioned briefly that inflation is absolutely having an impact. It affects our flying hour programs, repair parts, repair engines, and that certainly have an impact. And what does that ultimately result in is at the other end, reduced readiness if you don't have the way to keep your aircraft maintained and your crews up to speed, just from an aviation type aspect. So it certainly has an impact. And at the ultimate end of the day, can you put forward less into the theaters to support the geographical combatant commanders if there's less resources? And I'd say that would be something we have to look at as we maintain and restack our prioritization between training, readiness, modernization, and employment.
Yeah, thank you. Admiral?
Where I have a concern is really in readiness and the ability to, what we're seeing with the focus on experimentation and concept development for step changes to be ready for what's ahead. We're seeing an increase in requirements for that experimentation and concept development and to get ready. Where I see concern going forward is in unmanned systems, multi-domain,
right,
with an emphasis on software, not hardware. And that gets to the autonomy and interoperability. We have to win as a nation in that capability space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Major Glenn, or General Glenn, excuse me, Major Glenn. Sorry.
I'm good with that.
Demoted you horribly. I am so sorry, General Glenn.
I'd go back and do that all over again.
A better day and age, maybe.
Senator, as a component without major platforms, it boils down to people. In our case, so the choice is in modernization, investments in modernization. How quickly can we go after the technological capability and expertise to understand our electromagnetic signature and our digital footprint, and to have an awareness of our adversaries? That would be one. The pace at which that change will occur is going to be impacted by resourcing. The alternative is to maintain a less, as has been alluded to by the other commanders, a less ready force or present a smaller force offering around the globe, which is obviously not what we want to do, because we have longstanding relationships with allies and partners that we want to sustain. But that's where we're at as a component when it comes to that budget situation.
Thank you. So I think all of your statements just further emphasized that we do need to have growth within this component, within SOCOM, and the budget to make sure that you are able to modernize, to make sure your readiness does not suffer, to make sure that we are able to fill the ranks and continue to fill the ranks in the future. I've always had it hammered in my head to assume prudent risk. But at what point does that risk no longer present itself as prudent? And I think we need to continue to move forward with a robust budget, and it is something that I will be pushing for as we move into our budget cycle through appropriations and with this National Defense Authorization Act. And with that, I will have no more questions, and so I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. And if I've got a few more. I want to try to get through them briefly. So we can get to this vote at 30 minutes. People start to get nervous. And General Slife, SOCOM's nearing a contract award for maybe up to 75 armed overwatch airframes, and this would provide reconnaissance and strike capabilities to small, geographically disaggregated teams of special operations forces. Can you articulate the requirement for the Armed Overwatch program and explain why a new platform is more affordable and effective than existing platforms, including, certainly for, ground attack, the A-10, but also for reconnaissance, something like the MQ-9, and just, a little bit about on the requirements and the affordability, effectiveness aspect of this.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it, Senator. So a couple of aspects to that. First of all, our methodology for supporting our forces on the ground over the last several decades has really boiled down to the development of what we call an air stack over objective areas. And so you'll typically have single-role specialized platforms, AC-130s, A-10s, MQ-9s, U-28s. You have this stack of airplanes over an objective, each platform providing a niche capability to the force on the ground. That averages, in terms of cost per flying hour, over $150,000 an hour is what it costs to generate kind of the typical stack for that. As we look at having a multi-role platform in the Armed Overwatch in the Armed Overwatch concept, that kind of multi-role set of capabilities comes down to something less than $10,000 a flight hour. So it is a much more efficient way to do that. Further, it allows us to push those platforms further forward into more austere areas where they can operate co-located with the ground teams that they're partnered with. And so not having them have to fly from, hundreds of miles away, but rather being partnered with the ground team that they'll be supporting in places that have very austere aviation support with a very light logistics footprint is really what we're after, Senator.
How do you resolve the issue of something like an AC-130 gunship being able to lay down a massive amount of, fire to the ground with something like, an AT-6, with a limited? Has that been well planned and thought out?
Senator, I think I would say it depends on the mission that is being contemplated. And so clearly there will be missions that require more deep magazine fire support than what an Armed Overwatch platform might have. But the idea of the Armed Overwatch platform is it's a modular capability, and so you can outfit the aircraft with a robust suite of sensors that will exceed what is available with most dedicated ISR platforms today, or you can outfit the platform with a robust suite of precision munitions. It really depends on the mission. And so clearly, the Armed Overwatch platform is not a panacea for every tactical situation that a ground force might find themselves in. But for what we envision the enduring counter-VEO mission looking like, we think it's a prudent investment.
And when do you feel that the contract award will be made? Senator,
I think we're in months. So this summer, I expect to see a contract award. All the back and forth with industry, the proposals have been received, all the questions have been answered, and at this point, the source selection team is going through their deliberations and is going to make a recommendation to the Milestone Decision Authority at SOCOM here in the coming weeks, and then a contract will probably be awarded in the prior to the end of the summer.
Thank you. I have one final question for General Braga. At present, sometimes obtaining approval to drop a bomb is a lot easier than getting the permission to send a text message. So have you seen any improvement in the ability of your psychological operators to gain the authorities and permissions necessary to operate effectively in the information environment? And if you haven't, I mean, what more do you think we need to do?
Senator, I have seen some improvement. In my professional opinion, in order to match the sheer capability and capacity of adversaries, collectively, all of us need to be expand that capability, and we need to be able to move at the speed of the information environment, which is faster than perhaps we've been used to in the past. So I think it requires new relationships. Certainly, we are investing our own resources into expanding that capability in information ops to support our psychological operations forces. But it's new ground for all. But it's what we need to do in order to succeed both in competition and actually see for a role in high-end conflict as well. So we have a long way to go. We're on a journey. We've seen some improvements. We're dedicating resources, times, effort, and training towards it. But absolutely look forward to working with the leadership at the Pentagon and our interagency partners to inform you of any recommended changes moving forward.
All right, please do. And my door is always open to all of you. I know Senator Ernst is as well. So anything you need, we want to help. Also want to thank you, Generals, Admiral, for participating in this hearing today. And I look forward to continuing to support you and all the men and women at SOCOM, all 74,000. And this hearing's adjourned. Thank you.